Imagine living a life full of devotion and spirituality, leaving behind the worldly pleasures. This is the story of a woman who chose this path after her third child. In the whirlwind of life where we juggle various roles and responsibilities, sometimes we yearn for peace, tranquility, and a deeper connection to something beyond the material world. This woman, at the age of 46, found herself at this crossroads. Following the birth of her third child, she felt an inner calling towards a more spiritual life. The allure of worldly pleasures and mundane routines started to fade, and she found herself drawn towards religious activities. The time she used to spend with her husband and family was gradually replaced by hours of prayer and meditation. She encouraged her husband to join her, suggesting that as they were growing older and their children were becoming more independent, they could dedicate more time to spiritual practices. But this shift was not just a change in routine or interests. It was a transformation of her lifestyle, a metamorphosis that was both profound and personal. She was not just reading religious texts or visiting holy places. She was immersing herself in a spiritual journey, seeking a deeper understanding of life and existence. However, this change was not welcomed by everyone in her life. Her husband grew increasingly frustrated with her new lifestyle. The harmony that once existed in their household was replaced by disagreements and clashes. Despite the tension, she remained steadfast in her devotion, believing that she was on the right path. But as she delved deeper into her spiritual journey, her relationship with her husband began to strain. His frustration turned into resentment, leading to frequent arguments. Despite the rising tension, she remained undeterred, steadfast in her devotion. As she embarked on this spiritual journey, her life took an unexpected turn. What happens when one partner changes and the other stays the same? The result is often a clash of interests and ideologies. It started with the woman's shift in focus. After their third child, her interest in her husband waned, and she found more solace in prayer. She suggested they both focus on spirituality as their children were growing and they were getting older. Her husband, however, did not share her newfound enthusiasm. As she leaned into a life of devotion and spirituality, her husband grew increasingly frustrated. He missed the companionship they once shared and found her disinterest in their relationship unsettling. This led to constant bickering and a growing tension between them. Every attempt at conversation ended in an argument. Every attempt at closeness resulted in friction. The woman, engrossed in her spiritual activities, was unyielding. She refused to acknowledge her husband's discontent and dismissed his concerns. She believed she was on a path of self-discovery and growth. She did not realize the toll it was taking on her husband and their relationship. The husband, feeling neglected and unheard, became irritable. His frustration seeped into every interaction with his wife. He started to question their relationship and his role in it. He felt pushed away, distanced from the woman he once shared a loving partnership with. It was a classic case of two people growing apart. But this was not due to lack of love or affection. It was a divergence in interests, a shift in priorities. The woman had found a new path, and the husband was left struggling to keep up. The tension between them grew so intense that it started to affect their daily lives. The house that once echoed with laughter and conversation was now filled with silence and resentment. The husband's attempts to bridge the gap only resulted in more arguments, more disagreements. As the husband tried to get close, their differences only seemed to pull them further apart. The unforeseen consequences of their diverging paths were now becoming painfully clear. The harmony they once shared was replaced with discord, and the love they had was overshadowed by resentment. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and in this case, it screamed of loneliness and isolation. In the wake of their disconnection, a quiet transformation began to occur in the husband. He found solace in his own world, a world confined to the four walls of his room. Those four walls, that once resonated with shared laughter and conversations, now echoed with the sound of silence, punctuated only by the tap-tap of his fingers on the mobile screen or the rustle of book pages. He spent hours immersed in this digital universe, reading books, exploring new ideas. It became his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the tension and discord that had seeped into their relationship. On the other side of these walls, the woman continued her journey, her focus undeterred. She found her peace in her children and her religious activities. She spent her days tending to the needs of her children, teaching them, guiding them, preparing them for the world outside. Her evenings were spent in prayer, her heart seeking solace in the divine. She found a sense of purpose in these activities, a sense of fulfillment that she no longer found in her relationship with her husband. But as the husband retreated further into his own world, the distance between them only grew wider. The threads that once bound them together seemed to have frayed, leaving an echoing silence in its wake. Their conversations dwindled to the bare minimum, their interactions limited to what was necessary. The shared laughter, the shared dreams, the shared moments, all seemed to have faded into the background, replaced by a silence that was deafening. This was their silent retreat, a retreat into individual worlds, a retreat from each other. It was a retreat marked not by words or arguments, but by silence. A silence that was more than just the absence of sound. It was a silence that spoke volumes about the distance that had grown between them, a silence that echoed with the pain of lost connections and unspoken words. As the husband retreated into his shell, the distance between them only grew wider. With time, the husband became more and more reclusive. This led to a whirlwind of questions in the woman's mind. The once vibrant man she knew was now a quiet, solitary figure, spending his days immersed in books or in front of a screen. His interactions with the world outside his room were limited. Even his conversations with his children reduced to bare necessities. This drastic change in her husband's demeanor raised a storm of concerns in her heart. She began to worry about his mental well-being. Was he suffering from depression or some other form of mental illness? The idea haunted her, adding a layer of fear to her already mounting confusion. But amid the fear, another question gnawed at her. Could there be someone else? An extramarital affair? The thought was like a thorn in her side, pricking her at the most unexpected moments. She found herself watching him for signs, analyzing his every word, every gesture. But the more she looked, the less she understood. And then there was the guilt of wondering whether she had done something wrong. Had her shift towards a more spiritual lifestyle, her disinterest in physical intimacy, been the cause of this silent retreat? She found herself wrestling with the thought, torn between her own contentment and the apparent unhappiness of her husband. As she grapples with these questions, we are left wondering about the impact of our choices on our loved ones. Our actions, our decisions, no matter how well-intentioned, can sometimes lead to unforeseen consequences. And often, it is those closest to us who bear the brunt of these consequences. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you have a story that you think could inspire others or bring about awareness, do reach out to us. Thank you for your support.